Hi, welcome to the Ithasa channel. Today we will talk about Amba once she leaves the palace of Hastinapur. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Nagendraya Namaha, Om Amme Narayana Namo, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Anjanaya Namaha, Om Gurue Namaha. So Amba had come with her two sisters Ambika and Ambalika from Kashi, brought by Bhishma, to Hastinapur to marry Vichitravirya. Amba says she's betrothed to Shalva. She wants to go back. She goes there, gets insulted, comes back to Hastinapur and wants to marry Bhishma. Unfortunately, Bhishma has taken an oath of celibacy. Oftentimes, there are interpretations that say that when Bhishma took the oath of celibacy, he sacrificed his manhood with castration. But in the Mahabharata, it doesn't mention anywhere that Bhishma castrated himself. There are no texts that specifically say that he castrated himself. His idea of sacrificing his manhood had more to do with the fact of self-restraint, that he wouldn't bear children rather than he couldn't bear children. So Bhishma refuses to marry Amba because he has taken this oath of celibacy, of not marrying, of not having children. And he tells this to Amba, and he gives Amba the option of staying in Hastinapur with the finest of luxury that could be offered at that time, and with all the respect that could be afforded to a princess at that time. For no one in Hastinapur would dare to open their mouth to speak a disrespectful word for Amba, fearing the wrath of Bhishma. And Bhishma gave this promise to Amba that she could stay in Hastinapur for as long as she wanted. And 6 years she stayed in the exquisite luxury of that time. But not a day was in happiness. For every day she would see her two younger sisters be treated as queens by the handsome Kuru prince Vichitravirya, a post that she was rightfully to hold. She would also see the slight smugness and the hatred that Vichitravirya looked at her with, for she was the one that refused to marry him. And every day she would meet Bhishma, the man she longed for, the man she craved for, the man she had given her heart to finally, and he would have nothing of her. He would treat her with respect. He would talk to her politely. He would be the utmost gentleman with her, but he would not marry her. And she wanted the respectability that came with marriage. And so 6 years she stayed in Hastinapur with a personal turmoil deep inside her, when finally one day she decided she can't stay a day longer, and she decided to walk out. Hair let loose, wearing her finest jewelry, royal silks. She was a vision to behold, extremely beautiful, with skin like liquid gold. As she walked the streets of Hastinapur, there was not a man who would not die to be with her, to marry her. But unfortunately, the two men that she wanted to marry would have nothing of her. And she walked towards the gates of Hastinapur, disregarding everybody with a blank look on her face. And as she exited the gates, she went towards a forest which she had seen on her journey to Shalva's kingdom the last time. She went to the forest and entered the forest and came across a huge ashrama at the forest. The ashrama of Rishi Saikhavatya. It's a beautiful ashrama with more than 100 students, all learning the various shastras and aranyas. And Rishi Saikhavatya was the master of it. When she walked into the ashram, this vision of beauty, everybody in that ashram was flabbergasted. The young boys who had come there to learn the knowledge of the Vedas stood rooted to the ground staring at her. Saikhavatya called her to his ashrama and asked, "Oh lady, who are you and what are you doing in this forest?" She introduced herself as Amba. She told him his problem, and as she spoke in fits and sobs, the young students gathered around, amazed at the vision they saw in front of them. A woman of exquisite beauty, in royal silks and royal jewelry, sobbing to their master and telling her story, lips quivering, tears running down her face, breaking down in fits of sobs and then controlling and composing herself, then again completing the story. That vision never left them, and they couldn't take their mind off it. She told her entire story to Saikhavatya. She told him the story of how she had gone. She was in her Swayamvara. Bhishma came and took her away with her sisters. How she went back to Shalva and requested Shalva to marry her, who was supposed to. But he insulted her, saying that she was not pure anymore. She was someone else's now, and sent her away. And then she came back to Bhishma and wanted to marry Bhishma, and Bhishma wouldn't do it. And she came and asked the Rishi, "Please tell me what path I should take. What should be the path I should take? And what's the right dharma for me to follow?" And the Rishi was confused. But he said, "You're free to stay in our ashrama, our gurukula, for a few days, till you get an idea of what you should do. And probably we shall also find a response to it." And for the next few days, the ashram was abuzz with the news of Amba. Students who would be normally learning the Vedas, the Shastras, and the Aranyas could only talk of Amba's plight. There were discussions happening at every point in the ashram among every student about what the right solution should be. Some said she should go back to Shalva. Some said she should go back to Bhishma. Some felt that they would all form a collective group and go to Bhishma and ask him to take Amba back. Some said they were themselves were the cause for Amba's plight, for something they would have done in their last birth, and they should do something in this birth to correct it. And each one of them would only think of Amba's plight through the time, from the time they woke up to the time they went back to bed. In fact, bedtimes were delayed because discussions would go on. And finally, after a few days, Saikhavatya realized that having Amba in the ashram would not allow any teaching to happen. In fact, teaching was happening, learning wasn't happening. So he decided to call in Amba for a talk. And it's very exciting, the way the Mahabharata describes Amba's stay in the forest at that stage. Amba would tell the story of her problems to Saikhavatya. And she would tell it to many more people over the next few days. And I shall recount everything. And each one of them would give their advice to Amba, would give their suggestions to Amba of what she should do. And you will notice that at every point in time, each person who would give his suggestion to Amba as to what Amba should do would give the suggestion based on his limitations and his ideas on what he would be capable of ensuring. So when Saikhavatya told Amba, brought up the conversation with Amba, he said, "We rishis in this forest are rishis who practice self-restraint, are rishis who practice vairagya, who've given up most of the pleasures of life. What do we rishis know about the ways of the king? What do we rishis know about the rules of various kings? Probably the best thing you should do is to go back to your father. For when a woman is happy, the husband is her everything. But when the woman is sad, only her father comes to her rescue. So you should go back to Kashi to your father, meet him, talk to him, and tell him the plight you are in. Take refuge in his kingdom and be there. Amba is not very convinced because she knows her father. And she tells him that my father is not the type who would take me back in after this insult has happened. He is not the type who would take me back into the palace. And I shouldn't be going there. Let me stay for a day or two more and then I shall leave. And the Rishi agrees. And as destiny would have it, there comes a Maharishi, a very exalted sage, a very exalted Rishi, a tall man with a white beard and white hair, fair and regal looking, walks into the ashrama. He is Rishi Hotravahana, and all the other rishis of the ashrama get up and give their respects to him. They give him argya and padya, water to wash his hands and water to wash his feet. And after he is rested and comfortable, they decide that this great rishi would be the right person to judge and decide what should happen to Amba. And Amba comes forth to recount her tale all over again. And it reaches a stage where she loves to recount the tale. She attains solace in recounting the tale. But in all fairness, she leaves it to the person she is recounting to decide what the best course of action should be. And she tells both Bhishma was not wrong because he came according to the Kshatriya values of taking a princess by force. Shalva was not wrong because he realized that Bhishma took him and there was a glint of happiness in her eyes when Bhishma took her. So both in their part were not wrong. So then what is dharma? Where should she go? What should she do? And as she was telling the story, a recollection came into Rishi Hotravana's face and he realized that this Amba was his granddaughter. For the Rishi Hotravana was once a king of Kashi in earlier times. His daughter then married the present king of Kashi, or rather after her marriage, that person became the present king of Kashi. And after he anointed his son-in-law as the king of Kashi, he went down to the forest, Vanaprasthan, as most kings used to do in their old age. And Hotravana spent many years in the forest doing penance, doing sadhana, doing a lot of prayers and attained innumerable powers. And then became a Raja Rishi or a Maharishi. So Hotravana in fact was Amba's grandfather from the mother's side, maternal side. And the moment he realized it, he remembered the times when she used to play with him when she was but an infant. And he got up and embraced her and said, "You're my child. I don't think you should go to your father because I know him. He's not going to take you. So the only two options you have left are either Shalva or Bhishma." And he said, "My close friend Parashurama, the Bhargava, who is an avatar of the Lord Narayana himself. I know him very well. He's very close to me and he's very fond of me. If you go to him, he will be the correct person to guide you. Parashurama, the Bhargava, would be the absolutely perfect person to give you the option of what to do. A brave Brahmana like him, he had taught Devavrata when Devavrata was a small boy, the art of fighting, the art of archery, the art of war. Devavrata later became Bhishma. So Parashurama holds sway on Devavrata. And if Parashurama were to convince Shalva, there is no chance Shalva would refuse. So the right person for you to meet would be Parashurama himself." And Amba asked, "How can a simple woman like me go and meet Parashurama? How could I go to Parashurama and meet him? Where would I meet him? Would he really meet me?" And Hotravana says, "Yes, my child. If you go to the Mahendra mountains, there high up in the Mahendra mountains is the ashram of Parashurama, nestled between the Gandharva gardens, where Gandharvas and Apsaras come to roam. You will see Parshurama's ashram where Parshurama, surrounded by his rishis, does penance. And you will recognize him from the flaming tejas that emanates from him, that extreme fire of brilliance, that fire of wisdom, that fire of courage, that fire of valor. Go to him, O Amba, you will meet him. And Amba starts riding to the long trek to Mount Mahendra, where she shall meet Parashurama and tell Parashurama her story. And destiny brings another sage to that ashram of sage Saikhavatya. And this sage who comes is a close confidant of Bhargava Parashurama himself, is a very close devotee of disciple of Parashurama himself, a disciple who has spent most of his life being with Parashurama, taking care of the ashrama and seeing to it that he learns all the knowledge from Parashurama. It's the sage Akritavrana. And Akritavrana comes to the ashrama of Saikhavatya around the same time. Is it by destiny? Is it by chance? And when he comes, he sees Amba waiting in the ashrama with red eyes from sobbing, and is curious as to know what happened. And when the sage comes, everyone in the ashrama gets up to give the salutations to him. Argya and Padya performed, the hands and feet are washed. And then Amba is made to tell her story another time. And this time she tells it to this great sage, who is a disciple of Parashurama himself. And Amba again goes on recounting the story of how she went to Shalva and back to Hastinapur and on. And she makes it a point to mention all over again that she doesn't blame Bhishma for it. For Bhishma did not know what her commitment was when he brought her from Kashi. She can't blame Shalva for it. For Shalva was justified in claiming that Amba went to Hastinapur willingly. And so she's at a loss to understand what to do. And then Akritavrana says something phenomenal. He tells her, no, you should blame Bhishma for it. It is Bhishma's fault that this has happened. If Bhishma had not come to Kashi and taken you, all this wouldn't have happened. And herein lies the beauty of each one giving their advice. Rishi Saikhavatya didn't have too much sway over the kings of Shalva or Hastinapur, so couldn't really do much, so he suggested she go to her father. Akritavrana knew the father well, because that was his son-in-law, and he knew that she wouldn't be welcome in his palace. So he said, no, don't go to your father. Go to the great Parashurama. And Parashurama's disciple, who over all these years after Devavrata left Parashurama's ashrama, would have gone on hearing about the greatness of Bhishma, would have heard from Parashurama the brilliant student that Bhishma was, would have repeatedly heard from Parashurama of how Bhishma was a fast learner, picked up all the Vedas, the Shastras, and the art of war from Parashurama like no other student. And definitely that would have incited a pang of jealousy inside the sage. And hence he told Amba that the only solution is that Bhishma should die and you should get revenge. That Bhishma should be killed and you should get revenge. And Akritavrana decided that Amba should go to Parashurama with one intention alone, the intention of ensuring that the Bhargava kills Bhishma. And he said, incidentally, the great Parashurama Bhargava is coming to this ashrama tomorrow because he has heard that Akritavrana is here and he would like to meet his close friend. So don't go anywhere, fair maiden. Stay here. Stay here in this ashrama and meet the great Parashurama here itself. And true enough, the next day, the great Parashurama, with matted locks of hair flowing down to his shoulders, erect, walking straight with a bow and arrow, quiver of arrows on his shoulder, a sword hanging down his waist, and his parashu or his axe on the other hand. The great Bhargava walks into the ashrama, old as time, yet looking young as ever, handsome in his looks, but the tides of time have taken its toll on his skin. And as he walks into the ashrama, the entire ashrama gets up in deep respect, for the avatar himself has walked in. They do the regular argya and padya, wash his hands and feet, then offer him curd and honey, common items found in the forest which are offered to great sages of great renown, and make him sit on a high stool. And then Akritavrana embraces Parashurama and they exchange pleasantries, and Akritavrana finally tells Parashurama the plight of his granddaughter. Tells Parashurama that this is my granddaughter, who is the princess of Kashi, and recounts the entire story of Amba. And then asks Parashurama, "O Lord, what is your opinion? What is the right path to be taken?" Parashurama puts his hand on Amba's head, and for an instant Amba can feel all her troubles drain away, and extreme calm and peace come all over her. But the agitation deep inside her will not go away so easily, and it comes back. And as Amba is looking, sobbing, standing there in front of Parashurama, Parashurama says, "Yes, it's a difficult proposition as to what would be the right thing. But maybe we can talk to either Shalva or Bhishma and convince them to take you back. I'm sure if I go to Shalva and talk to him, he will not refuse you. At the same time, if I talk to Bhishma, he also will not refuse you. So tell me, Amba, where would you like to go?" But for the last full day instigated by Akritavrana, Amba has stopped wanting to go back to Bhishma. She just wants Bhishma dead. And that is the first time she actually utters the words that she wants Bhishma dead. She wants Bhishma killed. For until the time Akritavrana did not bring it up to her, she was still in a dilemma as to where she should go to, and she was looking for a person who would convince Bhishma to take her. In fact, whenever people would suggest that she should go back to Shalva, she would immediately discount the idea as preposterous and say, "He is never going to take me back," but find a way to convince Bhishma. So all through till that point of time, her sole goal was to find other people who would convince Bhishma to take her back, where she had failed to convince him. And finally, when Akritavrana had said that Bhishma should be killed, it was then that she felt that yes, probably he was right, being a big sage and all, and being the disciple of Parashurama himself. Maybe it was time Bhishma was killed, and maybe it was time to get Bhishma killed. And so she tells the Bhargava, "Oh Parashurama, great Rishi, I don't think Bhishma is going to take me back. He is much too proud to do that. I would like him to be killed by your hands. That would offer just revenge for ruining my life." And Bhargava was surprised. He says, "I've stopped fighting. I've given up my war. My warrior days are far behind me. The only time I fight now is for the protection of the Brahmanas. And if any Brahmana is being tortured or tormented, I will stand up and come to his support and kill the tormentor. But other than that, I have given up fighting." And suddenly Akritavrana interjects. He should be the last one interjecting, but he does. And he says, "No, my Guru, no, Bhargava. Bhishma should be taught a lesson. You had made an oath once that you will protect all the Brahmanas." Well, Amba wasn't a Brahmana, but he brought up that oath nevertheless. And he said, "You have made an oath to protect all the Brahmanas." And you had also made an oath to protect all the people who come to you for protection. People who are tormented, who come to you begging for protection, it is up to you to protect them. And here, Amba, this desolate soul, has come to you for protection. You owe it to your dharma to go and kill Bhishma. And in a slight irritation, Parashurama says, I remember my oath. I remember the oath I took. But the oath was specifically taken as a last resort. First, we should try reconciliation. First, we should try to reconcile ourselves with Bhishma and try to talk to him into it. And Akritavrana again reminds Parashurama about his oath. He tells, you had once promised that if ever a Kshatriya were to arise, who was so proud of his prowess, who was so proud that he defeated all the other Kshatriyas, you would then challenge and kill him. And Bhishma is that Kshatriya who is now arisen, who has threatened all the other Kshatriyas and punished them and conquered them. And his arrogance knows no bounds. And it's now up to you to quell that arrogance. Oh Bhargava, please do it. Don't fall back, it's your dharma. When Akritavrana was harping so much about it, Parashurama relented. He said, let us go to Bhishma. Let us talk to him. Let us see what he says. And then we shall decide. And so Parashurama, with Hotravahana, Amba in tow, Akritavrana, and many of the senior munis of Saikhavatya's ashram start the trek to Kurukshetra near Hastinapur, where they want to meet Bhishma. They reach Kurukshetra in due time. Parashurama has memories of the place where he slaughtered every Kshatriya of his time and created 7 pools of blood over which Saraswati finally flowed, and Saraswati purified that empty space called Kurukshetra as the karma bhumi of Kshatriyas, the karma bhumi of Kshatriyas. And then, through one of his junior disciples, Parashurama sent word to Hastinapur that he has come and is waiting in Kurukshetra for Bhishma to come. When Bhishma receives the information that his guru and master Parashurama have come, he is absolutely happy. He is in absolute happiness and glee. Immediately he creates a large retinue of people who will go out with him to meet Parashurama. And the head of the retinue is a cow. And the cow leads this group of people filled with brahmanas, sages, and other kshatriyas and common folk from the town who will now go to meet the great Parashurama. The great Parashurama whose stories are everlasting in Hastinapur. People have never seen him, but the stories are there and they want to finally go and meet the great Parashurama. And so there's a huge crowd that goes to Kurukshetra to meet Parashurama. When Parashurama sees Bhishma, he says, my Devavrata, my child, come into my arms, and in absolute sincere happiness hugs Bhishma. They hug for a long time and he looks at Bhishma and says, my God, how you've grown from that young tender boy to this man who is reaching middle age now, and gives another hearty laugh. And he says, even your mother Janvi says you don't go to meet her often. The little what she hears about you is what she hears from men who've come to absolve their sins in her waters. And occasionally she asks them about you and hears great things about you. Yes, you've become a great man. And then Bhishma says, tell me, O Guru, what brings you here? Your wish is my command. And then Parashurama looks at the forest cover nearby and signals to Amba, and Amba walks into the clearing. And seeing Amba, Bhishma closes his eyes. Those pangs of love have never diminished in the last 6 years. If anything, they've increased. And seeing her brings those pangs into absolute hurt. In the final days of Bhishma, the final days of the Kurukshetra war, on the 10th day, when the arrows started raining down on Bhishma, when Shikandin was raining those arrows down in Bhishma, at Bhishma, Bhishma knew Shikandin was Amba. Story we will tell. And Bhishma knew that every arrow of Shikandin was aimed at Bhishma's heart. And though the arrows of Arjuna went in far deeper, it was the arrows of Shikandin, who used to be Amba, that hurt him the most. He took that pain to the last day of his life. And when he saw her come out into the clearing, he froze. He knew what his Bhargava was asking of him. But he bent his head down in humility and asked his Bhargava, "Tell me, O great Guru, what shall I do for you?" And Parashurama said, "You have done a disservice by bringing the Kashi sisters to Hastinapur. The eldest one, Amba, should be marrying you since you brought them. Marry her. I heard you've taken an oath against marriage, an oath of celibacy. What is this oath? These oaths mean nothing when your Guru comes and tells you to do something. These oaths have no value when your Guru orders you to do something. Today, as your Guru, as your teacher, I am ordering you to marry Amba. Take her in marriage. I order you, your oath should not stand a chance." And Bhishma shakes his head and says, "No, my oath is my life. It's the dharma I follow. It's the dharma by which I live my life. I cannot break my oath. This oath was what I took for my father to bring Satyavati home. This is the oath that shall govern my life for the rest of my life. I cannot break this oath even for you, O Master, O Guru." And Parashurama gets angry and shouts at him and says, "How dare you question my authority? How dare you question my order? If you do so, I will curse you, that will finish your entire race. I will take arms against you and kill you this very instant." And Bhishma remains unmoved. He says, "My Guru, my Lord, whatever you may say, I am sorry, but I cannot give up this oath. When I take an oath, it is to uphold my dharma that I do it. What difference would be there between us and the animals if I cannot uphold my dharma? What difference would be there between ordinary people who live from the power of their instinct? What difference between me and them if I break this oath for the instinct of love, for the instinct of marriage, for the instinct of marital bliss? My Guru, I cannot do it. This oath means much more than me. It is far greater than me. It is far greater than anything that this land can offer. My oath is everything for me. My Guru, please don't ask me to break it." And this is the relation Bhishma had with his oath. His oath was everything in life. There would be times in the future when he would have to stand as a mute spectator to absolutely horrible things going on in the palace. But because he stood firm in his oath, saying that I will only rule as a regent, the true king will be somebody else of the main Kuru dynasty, he just kept quiet. He let the things pass. There were times in the future when if he had challenged that oath by a little bit, hundreds of thousands of lives would have been saved. Hundreds of thousands of lives of poor soldiers would have been saved. They would not have gone to their slaughter in the Kurukshetra war. But Bhishma stood by his oath, for he believed that that oath was what separated him from adharma. What separated him from animals What separated him from common folk who had no respect and who had no greatness for dharma, who did not value dharma, and he refused. And Parashurama the Bhargava gives Bhishma an ultimatum. You either fight with me and lose and die, or marry Amba. Take your pick. And Bhishma bows down to Parashurama and says, "O great Guru, you have no idea what my oath is. You demean my oath. It doesn't bear good for you, my dear Guru." And this is where the sternness of Bhishma came. He was willing to challenge his own Guru, the great Parashurama, who had once 21 times rid the earth of Kshatriyas. He accepts the challenge. And then Bhishma quotes the Puranas and says, "My dear Guru, there's a shloka that says that you can fight your Guru. You can fight against your Guru if he's taking the path of adharma. And a Guru who can follow adharma needs to be beaten by the Shishya. So, O Guru, think before you ask me for this favor again." And Parashurama stands unchanged. He is not willing to budge. And then Bhishma says, "O Guru, it is not correct for me to fight a Brahmana. It is not correct for a Kshatriya to fight a Brahmana. But a Brahmana who takes up arms and gives up the path of the Brahmanic path doesn't deserve that same relevance and the same reverence you would offer to the great Brahmanas. In such a case, it is well within dharma to fight against that Brahmana. And it is said that you shouldn't kill the Brahmana, or an untold sin comes on you if you kill a Brahmana. But if the Brahmana is willing to fight against you, is willing to kill you, is willing to take up the path of weapons, then you are well within your right to kill that Brahmana also. Great Guru, I accept your challenge. I take it upon myself to fight against you. Let us go into battle, O Guru." And then Bhishma changes tact. Then Bhishma says to Parashurama, "There was a time in this very battlefield in Kurukshetra where you had killed Kshatriyas, waves of Kshatriyas, and their blood formed 6 pools of blood, and it was purified by their blood. But remember, O Bhargava, those Kshatriyas were no match for me. For you fought men of straw. You fought weak men. Great Kshatriyas like me were never born. You never had an able opponent. Today you have an able opponent. It is time you fear. It is time you tremble in your feet." Very strong words for his Guru. But Parashurama laughed. He laughed heartily and said, "O Bhishma, after this war I will go to your mother Janhavi, and I will tell your mother that your son lies in that battlefield floor, covered in my arrows, arrows that have found their mark, and he died in pain and he cried like a child before he died." Basically, it was trash talk. And I'm quite sure that the very fact that when Bhishma started the trash talk, Parashurama took it lovingly and in a great enjoyment, because he was probably the one who taught Bhishma how to unnerve the opponents with this kind of talk. So this kind of technique of unnerving your opponents at times of war was probably taught by Parashurama to Bhishma, which is why Parashurama didn't mind it. And then Bhishma says, "Let me get my arms and come, O warrior, and we shall fight on this field, on this Kurukshetra, the divine Kshetra of war." And Bhishma goes back to the palace. And the people are nervous when they've heard that Bhishma is going to fight his Guru Parashurama, the avatar of Narayana himself. And Bhishma goes and tells his mother Satyavati that this is the case and that Amba has brought the services of Parashurama to beat me. And Bhishma asks the Brahmanas to do pujas and do sadhana to ensure his victory. Very ironic, because they are now made to ensure victory of a kshatriya over another fellow brahmana. And then with all these pujas done, with all the sadhana done, Bhishma wears his white mail of armor, his white clothes, his white bow, and sits on his beautiful chariot, a chariot that is spacious with a huge central shaft rising up with the emblem of the Kuru dynasty. The chariot adorned with lion skin on the outside and tiger skin on the outside. A chariot that is unbeatable, and on his chariot he brings his charioteer who has fought with him for hundreds of wars earlier. A charioteer which can guide Bhishma's swift-footed steeds, horses that have fought multiple wars before this with Bhishma. And like a towering inferno, Bhishma rides into the plains of Kurukshetra. There he tells his Bhargava, "O Bhargava, it is time. All these years, these Brahmanas have been singing your praises, saying that the great Parashurama is a Brahmana who has emptied the world of Kshatriyas. Today he shall meet his match." The great Bhargava laughs and takes his bow and shoots a whole host of arrows against Bhishma. And the war is going to begin between Bhishma and Parashurama when Bhishma gets down from his chariot, walks to his master, touches his head to his feet and says, "O great master, today I do something which makes my heart heavy. Today I do something which I would never have dreamt of. I do something which I would rather die than do. But circumstances have come where I am supposed to do this. Forgive me for what I am going to do, Master, my Guru, and bless me that I may have victory against you, that I am able to use whatever you have taught me to be used against you, that I may make you proud in defeating you," and touches his head to his master's feet. And Parashurama says, "This is exactly what I expected of a great student like you, a great disciple like you. If you had not done this, I would have cursed you before the war began." And Bhishma then stands up and says, "O Bhargava, you're on your feet. I'm on a chariot. It's not a fair war. Let me give you a chariot for your use." And Bhargava says, "The earth is my chariot. The Vedas are my horses. And Akritavrana will become my charioteer. And Saraswati Devi will be my armor. Go, O great prince, fight me in today's battle, and I shall quell you, and I shall send you to Devaloka, and I shall send you to Yamaloka. And I shall ask your mother to then come and see you on the battlefield." So there was a lot of ribbing to put the other one's confidence down, but it was done in deep respect. And never once did Bhishma show disrespect to his guru. And then it's said in the Mahabharata, out of thin air, Parashurama conjured up a chariot of immense proportions, of a speed that is incomparable, of wheels that would not get bogged down in the mud. And Akritavrana became his charioteer, and the steeds of the chariot seemed to be invincible and extremely fast as thought itself. And the two then stood face to face. Bhishma blew his conch to signal the beginning of the war, and the two fought against each other one on one. Kurukshetra became a war zone again after the last time when Parashurama killed all the Kshatriyas of Bharatvarsha. And all the people from Hastinapur, the rishis from the forest of Saikhavatya, they all gathered round at the peripheries, Amba nervously looking on, Akritavrana supporting her and preventing her from fainting. and they all stood at the periphery to watch the two great warriors fight. It was said the Devas came down from Devaloka when they heard about the fight, and they would be going around in their Vimanas looking down at the fight from the top. And it was said that garlands started to be rained down from the heavens on Parashurama and Ganga Putra Bhishma for the war that was to ensue between the two. And finally, that great war ensued, where Bhishma took on his guru Parashurama. The war went on for 23 days. It initially started with arrows being rained down by each other. Arrows phenomenal in their precision, absolutely hurtful in their damage caused. The war between Bhishma and Parashurama was something to behold. Bhishma was like he was fighting in a trance. The flurry of movement from the quiver to the bow went seamlessly, without a break. Arrows were emerging in the hundreds on Parashurama. Parashurama, no less on the other side, was a vision of extreme beauty in war. It is said that when they fought, the Devas marveled at the beauty of the two people in the way they moved their limbs and the way they moved themselves. Bhishma's charioteer was extremely experienced, and Bhishma's chariot would flit from one side to the other in extreme speed, trying to miss the great arrows of Parashurama. And in Parashurama's divine chariot, Akritavrana ensured that the speed was no less than Bhishma's, and they fought with immense agitation. On the first day, it was just arrows, and on the second day, the astras came out. A brief note about the astras. What are the astras? The astras are divine weapons of gods. They're quite like the missiles that we use today. In fact, it was said that the astras were activated with mantras, and you had to chant a specific mantra in a very specific way to activate that astra. These astras were probably sound activated missiles. Now, we can always say that this is all nonsense and these never existed, this is all flights of fantasy. We have activated devices now. You can look into your phone and talk and say, "Hey Siri," and the phone will come to life and do your bidding. You can type in a code into a missile, and the missile will go specifically and attack a hair width point. With such high precision missiles being present today, why would we not imagine that such a missile could have existed then, when the Devas from a far advanced Devaloka would come to Bharatvarsha and give this knowledge to us? And these astras had different capabilities. Some would breathe out fire, some would breathe out water. Some would build walls, some would dig in caves, some would cause sandstorms, some would cause windstorms, some would cause the sun to burn bright and blind the enemy. And depending on their astras, they had names. There was the Varunastra, there was the Agnyastra, there were so many names for these astras. And on the second day, when Bhishma and Parashurama started fighting, they started activating the astras. Astras in between the arrows. Astras of phenomenal power. Astras that could threaten to annihilate huge tracts of land. Astras that could annihilate the entire living structure in a particular area. These are the type of astras that they used to use. And each time when Bhishma would pick up an astra and say a mantra into it, Parashurama would listen sharply to see the mantra Bhishma was using, and that would give him an idea of what that astra was. And he would invoke a counter astra to Bhishma's astra to counter that astra. So if you had to counter an astra, you had to decipher what that astra was before it was let out. Which means while the mantra was being chanted, you needed to know what astra that mantra would bring out. And so you needed to know a huge number of mantras that would activate astras, not just to activate your own astra, but to predict what astra was going to be activated by your enemy. And then in an instant, bring out the astra to combat that astra. And so it went on. On the second day, multiple times did Bhargava and Bhishma get hit by strong arrows, arrows that hit close to the heart, arrows that hit them on their chest, on their hands, and on their neck. And they would bravely pull out these arrows from their body. And they would bravely cut out these arrows from their body and go on fighting while they were bleeding. And there were times when the Bhargava would swoon and fall unconscious. There were times when Bhishma would swoon and fall unconscious. And the war and the battle would stop when they would fall down unconscious. And while they were unconscious, their respective charioteers would take care of them, would tend to their wounds and would try to resuscitate them. And when they would be resuscitated, they would start fighting again. And this went on over the second, third, fourth, and fifth day. And then Bhishma realized that this war is getting quite strong. And he started using more and more powerful astras. And Parashurama started using more and more powerful astras that would combat the astras Bhishma would invoke. And when these powerful astras were used, the trees in the nearby areas would start falling, and the people ran to the nearby town of kingdom of Hastinapur because they knew that the astras, but that they would be collateral damaged in the war of the astras. And finally, as the days started progressing, both men were badly injured. The nights would be spent by their assistants tending to their injuries. Cuts and wounds of various sizes would be tearing their skin apart. They would have fainted multiple times in the course of the war. And every time they would faint, Amba would get happy if it was Bhishma who fainted. And she would get angry and sad and exasperated if it was Parashurama who fainted. And finally, as the days started to rage on, Parashurama decided to use the Brahmastra and started to invoke the Brahmastra. And hearing the mantra of the Brahmastra, Bhishma himself started to invoke the Brahmastra. And suddenly the gods from the heavens who had come down to watch this war realized that if these two people would release the Brahmastra, that would be the end of Bhuloka. That would be the end of the earth. And the Brahmastra, probably like a nuclear missile, would cause a complete catastrophic damage of Bhuloka. And that is when they came out and pleaded with these two. But these two were in a trance. They were not conscious. And then Narada stepped in. The divine Muni from Devaloka, Narada stepped in and started playing on his veena. And on hearing the wonderful tone of the veena played by Narada, both Bhishma and Parashurama came out of that trance and revoked the Brahmastra. Every day for 23 days they fought. They would start at dawn and fight till sundown. Night times were spent in tending to the injuries, both of the Sarathi, the charioteer, and themselves. Their horses also would be taken care of. Finally, after 23 days, that night when Bhishma went to sleep, he prayed to his mother Ganga that she guide him on whether he should beat his teacher, Bhargava Parashurama, whether what he is doing is part of dharma, or will he attain eternal abomination for having done it. And that night, Ganga came in his dreams, along with 8 Brahmanas, who then in his dream told Bhishma, yes, what you are doing is absolute dharma. But what you should do tomorrow is to invoke the greatest astra of all, the Prasvapastra. And if you can invoke that Prasvapastra, then the great Bhargava will be vanquished. So when Bhishma woke up in the morning, he woke up with renewed vigor to fight his guru. They got onto the field and they took arms and started fighting. That day the war was bloodier than all the previous days. 3 times did Bhargava send in shafts like snakes, send in shafts like the Vajra of Indra, send in shafts like the mace of Yama to hit Bhishma. 3 times did Bhishma faint in the battlefield. Multitude of times did Bhishma take extremely sharp vulture-tipped shafts and down his guru. At that point of time, few of the shafts hit Bhishma's Sarathi, and the Sarathi fell unconscious and succumbed to his injuries. And finally, Bhishma fought on, managing the reins of the horses himself. And in that war between Parashurama and Bhishma, which at this point of time was fought mainly in a trance, Bhishma invoked the Prasvapastra. And as he started saying the mantra for the Prasvapastra, Parashurama realized that there was no answer for that Prasvapastra. Parashurama did not know Bhishma had the Prasvapastra. He did not know when Bhishma got it. But Bhishma had got it from Shiva himself. Bhishma had got the Prasvapastra from Shiva, the Adi Yogi. And Bhishma was, when he started talking the mantra for the Prasvapastra, Parashurama put his bow down, bent down his head to Shiva, and accepted defeat and said, "O Shiva, this astra of yours I cannot counter. This wretch has lost." But Bhishma in his trance did not realize that his guru had put down his arms. And it was the Devas and Narada again who came from the heavens. And Narada started singing and playing his veena to bring Bhishma out of that trance. And as Bhishma woke up from the trance, he saw that his guru had stood still, just staring at Bhishma, and he revoked the Prasvapastra. He bowed his head down to his guru, and his guru came to him and blessed him and said, "My son, today you have defeated the great Bhargava. Today you have defeated the great Parashurama. I am proud that today you have defeated me, my own student. What greater glory can there be for a teacher that his own student and who his own pupil has become better than him?" This was the magnanimity of Parashurama, where rather than feel lesser of a human being for having been beaten by his pupil, the pride that welled up in his heart was unbelievable. He embraced Bhishma. Tears flowed down his cheeks and said, "Today you are the greatest Kshatriya to have ever lived. I have never come across a Kshatriya ever in the past who could match you." And so then Parashurama turned to Amba, who was watching in the sidelines sobbing, and turned to Amba and said, "My dear Amba, I have failed you. This man is unbeatable. I cannot take this fight anymore. I have done my best. In all fairness, I have tried my best to fight this man, but it is not possible to fight him. There is nobody else on the face of this earth who can take him down, and it is not in me to do it. I humbly accept my defeat and I walk away. It is in your best interest to request Bhishma yourself once, and if he refuses, to understand that there is no other way in which Bhishma will either marry you or be killed." And so saying, Parshurama walks away, never to fight ever again. That was the last fight the great Bhargava ever took part in. Amba, in tears, realizes that the one chance she had for ensuring Bhishma would be dead is now gone. And the only thing in front of her would be to do penance, penance of the ultimate level, penance of a level which can be incomparable, to ensure that she herself gets the power to beat Bhishma. And so saying, she walks away. Amba goes to the mountains and starts her penance. We will talk about Amba's penance in the next episode. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Nagendraya Namaha, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Amme Narayana Namo, Om Anjaneyaya Namaha, Om Gurave Namaha.